being here at 9 in the morning. By Indian standards, by the way, this is dawn, okay, for as far as conferences are concerned. So we really are at the breaking news edge of the day in terms of news, and I'm delighted to have all of you. Because I'm not very good with names, you will excuse me while I look at the names to make sure that I get at least some of them right. The purpose of discussing what we are going to discuss today is that in 24 minutes, try and give those who are watching this a sense of policy making in your country, how it's made, and what forces, what pressures work on you, but also what it does to business with a view to the next 3 decades and to see how that goes. So I'm going to request all of you to make very short and very sharp comments to the questions I'm going to try and ask, so that we don't bore the audience with long speeches while they still haven't had their first cup of coffee, okay? So keeping that in mind, I'm going to start by asking only because your name begins with A, Mr. Aron Shaviv, to just tell us about policy making in your country, which has had huge leaps in terms of technology, in terms of innovation, and what helps policymakers take those decisions.
Thank you very much, Dilip. Much like yourself, I'm a political consultant. So I think Mr. Panday, Dr. Kaufmann, Marc, and Mr. Smith, they're policymakers. We're no policy makers, but we advise them. And so perhaps I'll start off by saying, I'm sure you'll have, as Dr. Kaufmann said in his remarks, he said the purpose of policy is to give a better future to his citizens, and perhaps all these young people in the blue shirts sitting a little bit in the back. I think the real power in policy takes a long time to take effect, and it's to bring it down to a level that they can understand. So rather than speaking about macro, talk about micro. Maybe, perhaps I'll give a very, very quick example. I once ran a campaign for a candidate in Zagreb, and I saw his billboards were up before I started working for him. And his billboards had his name and it said, "For the President of Croatia." And the first thing I said to him when I met him is, your messaging is all wrong. If I'm a voter and I'm reading your billboards, you're telling me how your life might get better. If you become president, you will live in the presidential palace, you'll travel the world, you'll travel in a motorcade. But as a voter reading your billboards, you haven't told me how my life might get better. And so perhaps for all the policymakers around, I think that's the main idea, is how will your policy really talk to these guys in the back and explain how is your life going to get better.
Excellent, excellent. I'm going to come to you, Dr. Kaufmann, because you've been already sort of named for the comments you've made. From the German perspective, and I'm assuming I'm right on the country, how do you see a slightly different
labor, actually. And
that
so
we don't have a problem with.
as policymakers, we have to address all of these problems, bringing energy prices down, making a better attractive tax system for businesses, and then invest in young people with new technologies, new ideas, good education and good universities. And then we can tackle those things and have a bright vision that businesses will stay in our country and we create jobs also for the future.
As somebody who has grandchildren living in Germany, I'm very happy to hear that perspective because they are the future citizens of your country. Ambassador Sievers, I'm going to come to you because not just from the American perspective, but because you've served and worked in what used to be called, in the bad old days, the Middle East. You have a perspective of what West Asia, as it's now called, and policy making there, which you've seen from up close, is largely confined to a very small family structure. How, as an American, viewing it from the outside, did you see policy making as individual or family run versus oriented towards people's needs, as happened with Germany, where you have to go and ask industry, what is it you want? Does the same thing happen in your experience in West Asia, in the countries that you've served in?
Let me talk a moment about the United States, because
Sure.
I think we're in a very interesting period where President Trump is recalibrating a lot of the domestic policies over the last decades, both in terms of international policy, international trade, but also domestically, where there is a profound disagreement inside the United States about the role of immigration in our society. And unlike, say, many European countries or India, where you have, thousands of years of tradition, the United States is still a new country, and it's built on immigrants from around the world. And yet the idea of unrestricted immigration, open borders, and so forth was really the issue, I think, that President Trump, or one of the key issues that President Trump ran on, both in his first term and then in 2024 when he was reelected, getting a control over our borders, reestablishing due process for immigration, and not just, accepting large population transfers that without any restrictions and control. So that's one thing. And then also, I think his base has been a somewhat different. A lot of it is the old Democratic Party base, workers in factory parts of the economy, the energy sector, truck drivers. He also brought about this getting rid of income tax on tips, so that's for all of the service workers. So that's a different base than the traditional Republican base that really looks at business. Applying that to the Middle East, look, the role of an American ambassador anywhere in the world really is first to look out for the interests of the American businesses and the American community, American citizens, and also providing access and information to the local society. I'll give an example of the UAE, where you're absolutely right. There are royal families in each of the Emirates, and they are the policymakers. And yet there is an institutionalized desire to protect and take care of the entire resident population, because the Emiratis are less than 15% of the country. And if the workers who come and professionals and people at all different levels come from all over the world, if they don't feel that they have a good and comfortable life in the country, it's going to cause lots of problems. So they have prioritized creating a safe and secure working environment and living environment for all of the people that come there. That's a very different thing than the United States, but it's interesting to have that contrast.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to request you, Mr. Suren Panday, to give us a perspective from the South African nation's perspective, because that's very far removed from the geographies we've talked about, I would think, probably from my perspective as someone who's only been to your country a couple of times, closer to the issues we deal with in India. Would you like to tell us how, as a party treasurer is one thing, but as somebody deep in the politics of South Africa, how do you see policy making getting future-oriented, which is the theme that we're trying to look at from a business perspective?
Thank you very much for that question. I think just for the benefit of the audience, I'd like to start off by saying that South Africa's constitution is recognized as being world-class. We've got excellent policies. We have a young population. We have serious challenges in translating those policies into practical and basically fueling growth in the country. Hence, we have unemployment of 32%. Over the past 12 to 18 months, steps have been taken, and we've got various commissions of inquiries that's currently going on. And with the young population, and our first speaker alluded to it earlier on, when we went into elections 18 months ago, the population and the results of that resulted in a coalition. So I believe that the political arena now with a coalition is going to result in those policies being translated into key deliverables that are necessary to reduce the unemployment level. And as you reduce unemployment level, you create and you become more consistent with your policy. You're going to get more capital coming in, more opportunities, and we need to also reduce the density of legislation that makes it very, very challenging for foreign companies to come and trade in South Africa.
Thank you. Thank you. May I request you, Mr. Stuart Smith, to now chime in from your part of the world. I hear around the speakers who've spoken that the issues which resonate are political sensitivity to what the citizens are demanding. I'm going to push you a little further by asking you how policymakers in your country are able to read the tea leaves of the future and try and attune the economy and business to what is going to happen tomorrow, which very often citizens are not necessarily aware of, but young citizens are going to be affected by.
Well, thank you for what is quite a difficult question to answer. Ultimately, politicians or policymakers, if you want to call us that, are actually governed by the length of a political term. And so that does lead to short-term thinking, really, because you have to get re-elected.
Yes.
But with that in mind, New Zealand is a trading nation. Largely agricultural exports are the greatest export that we have, followed by international tourism. But we also have a vibrant tech sector, which is largely associated with agriculture. But we do have, as I said on Thursday, the third most space launches behind the US and China. So we have, and that's a private company that was started by a university dropout who like to build rockets. So anyone can succeed, even in a small country, with tech. So the trick for policymakers is to create an environment where those people can emerge and they have the facilities to be able to grow. And that was some key policy decisions that were made over about 8 years ago that enabled that space industry to get started by giving them good regulatory framework so that they could get their launches underway quite quickly. We have because we have in the middle of the Pacific, and it's not a crowded aircraft flyover space, particularly to the east of our country, so it's very favourable for that sort of activity. But we face a much greater, we've got two big problems in my view that we are trying to address. Number one, I spoke about free trade agreements on Thursday, so I won't go over that again, but number one is energy security, and we had two bad policies brought in by the previous government which banned the exploration of oil and gas, which one thing we had going in our favour was very low sovereign risk. That policy change destroyed that. So we've got to build that back. That's the first thing. And as part of that, we have to ensure we've got, as Dr. Kaufmann mentioned, a good mix of generation sources, and we need more energy capacity than we have demand for, or we're going to have problems. And the other one that I think really exercises me, speaking really to the young people, which is where you started on this, is our human capital problem. We have to import people to work and do jobs, particularly skilled people, but also low-skilled jobs, and yet we have a very low unemployment rate, but we have a lot of people that we're paying not to work. And the problem with that is not just a financial one, it is a social one, because people that don't work, all the statistics show they have bad outcomes for them and for their children. And so we've got to address those problems.
Thank you. I'm going to do, we've got 7 minutes and we've got 5 speakers. A one-word reply to this question, and I'm going to start in reverse order because of your patience. If there was one policy issue, just one word, remember I'm looking for one word, one policy issue, for example, it could be employment, it could be energy, what is it that you would change in the way things are happening in your country today? Which is the one policy silo, as it were, that you think change is critical? We have just 6 minutes, so I'm going to just ask for one word from each of you.
Energy.
Thank you. Energy.
Labour legislation to reduce the complexity.
Lovely. No, not you. Ambassador, because it's in reverse order.
I could think of several, but since you asked for one.
Just one.
I think we need a reform of our higher education. I think it's gone astray.
Fantastic.
And it needs to be more focused on the future.
Lovely.
Well, since energy and education was already mentioned,
you can repeat.
I will take the bureaucracy. I think this is a really big issue, especially not only in our country, but coming from the EU. You might be aware of it, and we need to cut that back tremendously.
Cut Brussels to size.
And I think for me, the one-word answer would be something which I don't think we need to decrease, but something I'd like to see increase would be security. Whether it comes to actual geopolitical security, energy security, job security, I'd like to see it increase rather than decrease.
Thank you. And because we have the missing Indian policymaker, I will end with one story just to share with you, which hasn't been shared even in public before, is that the first job I got after I passed out of my master's program in economics was policy making. Luckily, I was a junior economist, but this is a time which many of you because you are either students of history or understand, was India's high socialism. So I was with a group of people in a big building which decided what the price of tires would be, what the price of paper would be, and we did massive calculations right through the day. Most of the calculations I didn't even understand. But finally, the price we decided was the price at which industry would have to produce and sell these products at. We've come a long way in policy making today, but I'm so glad that the global experiences that all of you have shared gives us a brief glimpse into what is next for policy making across the world. Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen, for being with us for that first panel of the day, the third day of NXT, the third and final day, and we promise it's going to be a day that you will not forget. And we're moving on now to continue with our theme of Next in Business. We're going to be now focusing on public spending.